Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for joining us for this special edition of Tell Me Your Story. Special edition because normally we're on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. and Monday mornings at 1 a.m. streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. We also have the podcasts at SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, and many other locations, too numerous to mention right now. And we hope that you will take advantage of those. But did you know? Please tell me you knew this. Maybe you didn't. We're on YouTube now. That's right. We are now on YouTube, where you can watch these interviews. I hope you'll do that. And just go to to Tell Me Your Story or Richard Dugan. Just look for the man with the hat. You can't miss him. And hope you enjoy these programs. I am going to put a link up on richarddugan.com to the YouTube channel, but I am a one-man band, and this one man has way too many instruments to play all at the same time. So bear with me. We'll get it up there. We also hope that you will support us financially. If you can do so, we would greatly appreciate it. We do have PayPal and Patreon accounts for your security as well as ours. We also hope that you will participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, the 2020s. Take that time to go within. Spend time in quiet, peace, calm. Listen to that still small voice. We're going to learn a little bit more about that and more about our guest who is returning all the way from Australia, and it's tomorrow where she is. And from her perspective, it's yesterday where I am. And I thank her for rejoining us. Rebecca Dawson, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. See, this time is not an issue here. I'm in the future, you're in the past, and we meet in the present.
There you go. I love that. I love that. One of the things that is so interesting, of course, is the one book we talked about when you were on our program. We talked about it, but we talked about a lot of other things as well. The Agreement. And I know that things are chosen for a reason. I'm curious if it was just a publisher's decision or if you had any decision on this. Why is the cover green and that shade of green? It's very vibrant, okay, but I thought that's a rather interesting selection. Although my book, Choices, is red.
It was an interesting selection, and like all of the content that I bring forth, I have obviously my team of guides and masters that bring that through in a very specific and particular way. And we know that color is vibration, and it has a particular signature and a particular quality. Most of my branding actually doesn't have anything to do with green. Usually everything I do is magenta and purple and gold. So to have this green, they were extremely adamant that it needed to be an emerald green and it needed to have depth in it, because they shared with me that this book it's like an emerald tablet. And it's a vibrational piece, and they wanted it to have that feel. And normally I would put an image on a book cover too, but this was to have no image, just the vibrancy and depth of that emerald green color. Now,
was that your choice or the choice of spirit, the universe,
yes,
or the publicist?
No. That's all. Everything that that we create comes through myself and my team of masters that I channel. So I self-publish. So that's all. It's all as guided. That's the way it needed to be.
So it was the publisher.
Well, like you, I guess I'm a one-man band, right? Or a one-woman band.
One-woman band. There you go.
Yep. I do
it's extraordinary. I've met so many people who, and I think the correct term is who channel. And they channel for various reasons, if you will. I'm intrigued by people such as Edgar Cayce, who had a particular philosophy. I think we brought him up last time we talked. I'm fascinated by him and his willingness to continue doing what he was doing as far as channeling, in spite of his personality-centered philosophy that he believed in. I thought that was, I find that very intriguing and very enlightening, because in spite of his personal ego-centered misgivings. He said, I got to do this. And that's kind of how you feel as well. I mean, but I would venture that you have, I don't want to say made peace with, but you have basically said, hey, this is just what I do. Doesn't matter what my personal philosophy is. This is what I do.
Well, I do feel that, anyone that taps into the great central cosmic wisdom that's within all of us,
Mm-hmm.
there has to be an experience there of suspending your own belief. Because in order to access more, in order to have a glimpse that's beyond what we already have as humans in our limited way of seeing the world and seeing reality, we have to be willing to suspend what we know. We believe that belief, gives us opportunity, but I've come to learn over the years that belief limits our experience. And so for me, every time I go into that channeling space, it's an exploration of what lies beyond belief. So personally, it's an exercise in suspending belief. And that's quite different to what I thought it would be when I first started channeling, which was I thought that the information would come through that would reinforce belief, that would strengthen what we already knew, that would add to it, that would somehow fortify our sense of self. And yet it's been the opposite. It's actually been quite a shattering.
So basically, we don't have a clue. We don't know what we don't know because we think we know, but what we're thinking is wrong, or it's incomplete, or it doesn't encompass the things that need to be understood. And there is a difference, and maybe you can elucidate on this, a difference between belief and knowing, believing and knowing. Because a lot of people, they go around espousing their beliefs as if they know it.
Right. Well, I think knowing in essence is a feeling state. I think it's a feeling state of what is. And I think belief is the enunciation of that into a concrete form of information. And, so much of what we do in our spiritual quests and our quests as conscious beings to understand more is we seek and we search and we're hungry for the answer, for the solution, for that bit of information that's going to make everything make sense. And that's that concrete piece of information or knowledge. That's the belief. But the wisdom sits, as we know, in the journey, in the mystery. And I think that knowing is being comfortable in sitting in the mystery. And belief is what happens when we attach to the information or the knowledge.
Mm. We are
So
talking. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, let's not underestimate the power of knowing in the mystery, because we quite often get that mixed up. We think that to know means to have the answer, but to know means to feel safe in the great open space.
Interesting. I find it fascinating. Many of the sayings that I have come across, some that have been actually given to me in my early 20s as well, I guess I should say, an arrogant young man who thought he had a lot of the answers. I was told that it is better to begin in doubt and end in certainty than to begin in certainty and end in doubt. And to that, I remember Greg Braden sharing on this program with us when we were talking about the healing power of belief. He says, there will come a day when we will no longer believe. We will just know. As someone else has said, that our belief systems are we'll call it the 21st century form of BS, which we can't say on this program, but that's how they view it. And there's some truth to that, in that I've even had another guest say that your beliefs are all lies because they're not based on what is true, what is real. And they're speaking from a spiritual standpoint. because we have a difficult time knowing what is real. What is, and I'm going to throw that out to you from your perspective, from the messages that you have received. What is real? What is this world that you and I live in? If I tap on this desk, it's hard. I'll hurt my fist if I try to put my fist through it. And yet we also know that everything is energy. So is it real or is it not real? And so forth. So what is real? What is reality in that respect to this whole concept of knowing versus believing?
Well, I love the way you frame that. I think that's a really, really powerful place for us to explore, because belief as we understand it is always based upon memory. Experience happens first, an experience, an event, an interaction, a creation, and then a belief is formed to help us to refer back to that. So if we believe that our reality exists, surely it only exists in belief, in a reference to how it was or how it was experienced. So
Mm-hmm.
that leads us to the question, are we indeed living in a reality that is completely based on memory rather than the actuality of what is happening in the present moment?
Have you ever
So,
watched the football players training and they have that giant tire and
oh
they
yes,
lift it up and they push it over? I mean, and who knows? Maybe it's filled with concrete. I don't know. All I know is it's one of their strength tests, right? So here's the belief. I believe that a wheel will roll on the ground. But if you roll it like a football player does, because that's what you know, that's your point of reference, it doesn't roll. So is that kind of to your point of what you're saying, that that our experiences of things form our beliefs?
right.
The way we experience reality, or this mortal material world, is what forms our beliefs. And it's not until we decide to roll the wheel differently that it will turn, and oh, my belief is correct, because a wheel does roll, because I have now created a new experience.
Of course. And so if we always looking at life and addressing life in terms of belief based on what we already know, we're going to keep experiencing the same things over and over and over and over again. And this is where we start to establish rules and laws for our reality. This is how it works.
Mm-hmm.
This is how it works because this is how it did work. And so in order to create something new or have a new experience of that wheel or that tire, we have to be willing to suspend belief to see what is possible. So there's no presumption of what the probability is. We now open it up as a question, and a question is a very, very powerful mechanism for seeing what else can be created in that moment. We begin to operate beyond belief when we ask the question, always. So what is possible with this tire? What is possible with this wheel? Then allows a different experience to emerge. Then a belief can be created on that.
And spinning off of that metaphor of the circle is kind of our point. We want for people, myself included, to occupy a point on that circle, and occupy as many points on that circle, to observe the experience or the event or the thing in the circle in it from as many different perspectives as is possible, so as to have I guess we could say, a greater knowledge, observational knowledge of that experience, so as to form what we might call a fuller, better founded belief, if you will.
And I just I love that you use that symbology of the circle, because we're always trying to draw reference through distance, aren't we? That's the
Yeah,
great Maya, that's the great illusion of our 3D
exactly.
reality. So what happens if we get off the periphery of the circle and we actually get into the middle of the circle? Because when we're in the middle of the circle, we can see every point of reference all from one place. And this
That
is
is
what the
true.
great going within is. It's being willing to get out of what we know into the great unknown in the middle, into that
Yeah.
0 point. And now what can emerge from there? That's when the circle becomes a sphere.
Hmm.
And suddenly we can move in any direction with that.
It reminds me of the story from Autobiography of a Yogi, where Paramahansa basically said, "You didn't like that movie that we saw in the theater," because that's where they had just come out of. And he says, "Let me show you another cinescope." And he hit him hard on the chest. And the experience he describes is of seeing everything in all directions.
Yes.
As you say, the sphere.
The
Uh,
spherical view.
Yeah. Now, the closest thing we have ever had to that, I would say, Disneyland created you could call it a ride. Anyway, it's an attraction where they mounted cameras on a center point in 360 degrees. Now, that was just horizontally, but you could walk into the theater and you had screens all the way around, like you are describing. We're standing in the middle of the circle, and the images are being shown on the screens around us. So you're able to see 360 degrees in all those directions. I can only imagine the spherical view of the world. And it tells me, Rebecca, matter of fact, doesn't this elucidate what the majority of people aren't doing? They're not even doing the horizontal 360, let alone the spherical, shall we say, view, because they have, for whatever reason, accepted the truths of others telling them what it is they should believe, whether it's political or religious or educational, etc. And that's maybe one of the reasons why we have so much. I guess that would the term be tribalism in this instance? We have so much of that today, where your tribe isn't as good as our tribe because, and vice versa.
Well, as you describe it, I mean, I think you describe that so beautifully. That's the nature of our reality, isn't it? It's a holographic reality. And I think our greatest drive for survival as humans is to belong. So we're in this sphere of images, of projections, and we seek to belong to it.
Mm.
And as soon as we seek to belong to it, we're moving to the periphery of the sphere instead of being in the center of it. We seek to know it, so we seek to move closer to it and away from our center point, away from our best possible view. And I think our opportunity to step back into the center of that sphere so that we can actually see everything is
Yeah.
being willing to not know, because the desire to know what those images that are being projected are draws us closer to them. You know, this is the duality again. We try to
Yeah.
belong to it. Instead of disarming and saying, well, I don't know, I'm willing to suspend belief, I'm willing to be comfortable with not knowing. And it brings us back to that center point, and suddenly we can see. And I think this has been the story of many great wise ones and masters on our planet. It's when they've actually given up that quest to know
Sort of
that
the
suddenly
Buddhist
they
way.
exactly that they drop into that open space and then they can see. That's certainly been my experience. And
Well,
so not seeking to belong to the information is very important.
and to that end, not only not seeking to belong to the information, not seeking to control it, not seeking to um, dissect it. There's another saying: "Truth is only truth until it's written down."
Right.
Because if each individual is allowed to uh, to sift through it themselves and find the meanings for themselves. And I say this quite often on this program when I share observations or perspectives. Ladies and gentlemen, those are mine. I put those on nobody else but me. I still remember a conversation that I was having with someone. We were driving. I probably could have gotten thrown out of the car for this, but we were driving along, and at that time I was single, and I was talking about divorce and my perspective on it, not knowing that the woman I was in the car with, who was actually my general manager, we weren't romantically involved. I didn't know that she had been divorced. And and so she shared with me a little bit, and I got to understand a little bit more. Hence the saying, "It is best to begin in doubt and end in certainty than to begin in certainty and end in doubt." Because now I am among the same group. I am divorced myself uh, for over. Yeah, exactly. But I think that it's unfortunate that we use that word, because there are people who have come into our lives and gone out of our lives. But we don't say we divorced them. It's just our paths crossed, and they crossed. And we spent that time together, and we had some good times and maybe some bad times. And we're not with that person anymore. We're with other people. We're experiencing other things. You know, so yeah, I don't know what
Wow.
else to call it at this moment, but that's really kind of where I'm coming from, is we need to change our understand our almost our verbiage.
Well, I think, the human mind is quite obsessed with completion. So when we begin something and we're attracted to something or drawn to a particular system of information or a relationship or what have you, our mind seeks to see it through until it's complete.
Mm,
And yet it's our feeling state that tells us when things are complete, because there's no energy there to create anything anymore. And we've all had that experience where we
yeah,
feel like that energy's just gone for us, but our mind pushes us to continue on. So
yeah,
we tend to have directions in life that, in my view, go on for far too long, when we could be having more of a breadth of experience rather than a depth of experience. And that's what makes us multidimensional, having that breadth of experience.
and most people, though, see a divorce as a failure, when the reality when my when the reality my reality is, it's not a failure. It's just a learning experience. That's all it is, you know.
Well, it comes to its fullness. It's complete in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing new is being created here, and we're creator beings. Consciousness itself, that which we
Right.
are, wants to experience new all the time. And it's not necessarily about having a new relationship, but if there aren't new experiences happening within your relationship, there's not a lot of vitality there. And so
Yeah.
I think the challenge in relationships is to get into that feeling state and know, is anything being birthed today? Is anything creative happening here?
Yeah. How long, for those who are joining us for the first time here on Tell Me Your Story, how long have you been channeling?
About 20, how old am I this year? 27 years this year. A long time. I started very young. I was just out
and,
of high school.
and is it a conscious or unconscious channeling?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's a trance channeling, because when you move into the center of the sphere, as we were speaking, you have accessibility to many streams of consciousness. So this persona, or this aspect of myself that presents as Rebecca in this moment, is present while other aspects come through as well. So I'm as much delighted and interested and stimulated by the conversation and the wisdom as it emerges as those who are listening. But I'm very lucky because I get a visual as well. So I have a multidimensional view of the information as it arises.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
Sometimes I
kind of,
wish I was an animator, because the things that I could I could illustrate would blow your mind. But
you
finding
know,
words for them sometimes is a challenge.
I have a VHF cassette tape, videotape of the Merkaba that was put
Oh.
out by this one organization. And it's of the tetrahedron and all of this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And there are two different versions. One is with narration and music. The other one is just with music. But it is a meditation, both auditorily but also visually, which I find interesting, because I've always thought, yeah, you're supposed to meditate with your eyes closed, aren't you? But there are all kinds of meditations. I would venture that people who play sports, if they're in that zone, they are in a form of meditation.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
something we talk about a lot on this program. uh, Classes, do you hold classes? And obviously it's virtual and so forth.
Yes.
What type of classes do you hold for people?
Well, I did all sorts of things, but It's usually more spontaneously delivered. I might be able to offer a theme or a visual representation of what the series, because we do live stream series. I do live events around the world too, but of course I'm not able to do that during these current conditions.
Right.
And usually I'll be given a title and a theme, and the information will always be completely new and spontaneous, which I really enjoy. So at the moment we're doing a series called The Open Space, and it's a 5-week series. And we're actually, this week, we just did one 2 days ago, we're actually exploring the fabric of reality.
Ooh.
And, and what is
Is
that?
it suede? Is it plaid? What is the is it velour?
Well, this is what we're exploring, because unless you can have a sense of it, any kind of intellectual theory about what the fabric of reality is purely an intellectual exercise.
Yeah.
So that's what we're exploring, and we've done lots of seminars on things like time and holographic reality, how the body really functions. Yeah, really, I always find it fascinating. We're learning more about ourselves and the nature of our universe, and there's always more to discover.
Out of just the spontaneous ideas that come to my head from the universe, for the universe asks the questions. I am just along for the ride, and it's been quite a ride. What is the nature of the universe as you have learned it thus far?
The nature that I have understood it as so far, and one of the most challenging concepts I think the human mind has with this, is to understand the nature of the new universe beyond a framework of purpose. Because as soon as we start to assign purpose or value or function to anything, we immediately limit our understanding of it to cause and effect. And so the universe in itself is sheer possibility that unfolds in infinite ways. But we have a very interesting way as humans, and with our human logic, of looking at it and thinking, to what end? But why? And why is it the way that it is? But in my view and my experience, it's never the way that it is. It's always more than what it is. It's always something other than what we think it is. And so the
Yeah.
universe, I guess the way I'm experiencing now, and it could be different tomorrow because my view of it always changes, is that it's the mystery. And we don't give ourselves permission to embrace our vitality in mystery. You know, like the ancient mystery schools. We have
Yeah.
an understanding that the mystery schools were about going and immersing yourself in that space and finding the answer. And yet everything the masters have been sharing with us is that no, the mystery schools were a place to actually go and sit in the void space of the mystery.
Oh wow.
Because
That
it's like a space within all of the structure where you remember. And the aim is not to find the answer, it's to become comfortable in the mystery.
to be, just to be.
Right.
And as it says, as the Master Jesus spoke, be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And I pondered that for a long time and finally came to the realization that to be perfect is just to be. There's
Love
a,
that.
a, a definition of, I'm trying to remember if it's Allah or Allah Akbar. God is great in the Muslim faith. And it was explained to me this way, that when you dive into that phrase, you are talking about the great nothing,
Yes.
the great, and that is not blasphemy. That is what the definition is. It's, you know, we, because there is everything and yet there is nothing.
Yes. And it's a profound calamity of experience. You know,
Yeah.
chaos brings us to that point where everything becomes so close together and so compressed that it actually merges into nothingness.
Mm.
I remember the master saying to me about 10 years ago, or through me in a conversation about 10 years ago, when some of this information started flowing through, and I had difficulty with it because it really challenged my own beliefs, and I thought, gosh,
Mm-hmm.
no one's going to be really interested in listening to this. And there were some people who were listening to this information, and they're saying, this is so fabulous. You've got to set up a school. You've got to set up a whole course. This has to be like written in stone. This is the way.
Yeah.
And the masters were adamant. They said, no. Every time you think you have the answer, you must be willing to provide it. And they showed me this image of all of the written channelings I'd done and transcripts just going up in flames.
Yeah.
They said, do not attach to the information, because tomorrow it will be different.
I was dialoguing with a guest and I shared a particular perspective, and he says, well, I'm not sure that's intent. Let me share with you my perspective. And he did. And I listened and I thought about it for a second. And I said, well, there goes another one of my straw huts up in flames.
Right.
But it also ties in what I said to my sister many years ago. We were having Thanksgiving at my parents' house. I think we may have still been living there, or at least I was. We were in the kitchen, wrong place to have this conversation. And I said to her, I said, look, my beliefs of yesterday are not my beliefs of today, are not my beliefs of tomorrow, because I'm still living, I'm still growing, I'm still experiencing. And that's really what you're saying, is that you can't have a certainty about things if you're still living. And and as far as I know, and this is the other thing that intrigues me, the concept of heaven, all right, in the Christian philosophy. Granted, I was born and raised Catholic, so I understand it, and I'm
Me
not
too.
trying to. Yes, you too. And from what I've been learning about this life, as you and I have talked the last couple of times, and other people, we're here experiencing, we're here learning and growing, and we're trying to, either make sense of it or to not make sense of it, and just be, and so forth and so on. And then I thought, and the concept of heaven is that when you die, you're judged. And if you're judged good, then you go to heaven and you get to spend eternity doing what? Mingling? What are you going to do? And then I found out about life between lives, with Dr. Newton. We have a practitioner here in Santa Barbara, and he took me from the end of my last life, which I'd go back to in a heartbeat, and I'm kind of living that even today, and then took me into that space between the two lives, where he says, oh yeah, there's a period of rest, and then you go in, there is sort of a review, kind of like in the movie with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep. I gotta see that again too, by the way. That's such a fun movie. But then there's still learning. There are classes that you can take before you decide, and it is a decision, to come back to this earth. And I thought, okay, learning and growing between lives, or mingling. I'm going to go with the learning and growing. Mingling sounds fun for a little while, but I can't believe that is it. It's like, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
I
So,
think moving from that image of the circle you were talking about before,
mm-hmm,
and getting
mm-hmm,
into the center, and then it becomes a sphere. I think that's our opportunity to shift from a view of life after life after life and coming around and doing it again,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
to concurrent lives, to
Yeah.
being able to draw upon all of who we are, all of who we've ever been, all of who we ever will be, all of those experiences, all of those threads of ourselves in one place. And I
Mm.
do feel that this grand opportunity for expansion of consciousness right now on the planet can be experienced in that way. I'm certainly coming into contact with more and more people who are suddenly having new traits and passions arise in them, or suddenly having awarenesses of themselves in other lives. And I really feel that our view is getting grander because we're stepping into the middle. We're able to access all of that so that our lives don't become something based in past or future, but become available all in one place.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you put it that way. I, again, in my conversations with people, um, we were discussing how, for example, news organizations, especially the electronic, they want to get the scoop. All right, they want the lead story, and they want to make sure they get it first, right? And in order to get it first, they're not going to have all the information right now. More information is going to come out. The problem with that, though, is that the viewer or listener is already starting to theorize their position on that particular piece of breaking news. And we don't have the whole story. I think, in particular, of the young man, I can't remember his last name. First name was Richard. He was accused of being the Olympic bomber many years back.
Right.
And they thought, and this happens in a lot of investigations, and I'm not disparaging law enforcement, but as soon as they think they have the right person, that's all they go after.
This is it.
This is it. This is it. And what's really bad about that is that not only have they made the decision, this is it, but then when they find out, oh, this wasn't it, it's almost like they stop. In other words, they will try somebody. They'll go through one, maybe two or three trials, because the first two were hung juries. And then the third trial, the person is found not guilty. So the law enforcement, we're not gonna look. And they never do find. I don't know that they ever found the killer to this person or that person or the other person, because the person they thought it was found not guilty. They think that person was guilty, but there's nothing they can do about it. And it's like it ends.
Well, it's exhausting the lead, isn't it? And I think that's very indicative of how our minds work, because
Yes.
as we suggested earlier, the mind wants to pursue something in one direction and exhaust that avenue. It wants the answer at the end. So whether the answer at the end is guilty or not guilty, that's the end of that threat. That's what the mind does, rather than the true cosmic nature of who we are. Will say, I wonder what other view is available. I wonder what was possible here. I wonder what can unfold from this space. So we become the seeker of the experience that's already happened, rather than the creator of the experience. It's never open-ended. The mind will always take it to the end of a cul-de-sac rather than out into an open field.
I don't know if you watch much television or movies, but there are a few films out there, titles I don't recall, but I know I've seen these scenarios that you have just described, where they will actually have multiple cameras rolling from multiple directions. And the first part of the film, we'll use direction here, north, south, east, west. The first quarter of the film is all taken with the action from the north position. And then the next position is the south position. Ah, I didn't see that before. Then the east position, and then the west position. And then you begin to see that the conclusion that you came from in the first, let's say 15 minutes of this 1 hour film, the first conclusion you came to was incorrect because you didn't have enough information. You didn't have a good enough view. But then you add the south position for another 15 and so forth. And boom, all of the sudden you realize, oh my gosh, that person actually didn't do what I thought, and I thought I saw him do. Then again, that is part of our problem in our society today, is that we have our minds, that's the little game our minds like to play. And again, we pursue it until new information is put up.
And within that scene that you just described, perhaps if we positioned ourselves as that main character right from the beginning, instead of the observers of life, we were in the center of life, we would know exactly what the situation was. We would have a clear view from that position.
And when somebody has a supernatural experience, which is very difficult to observe by other people standing around the circle, I take the position, You had that experience. Who am I to take that away from you, to denigrate it, to demean it, to deconstruct it, or to basically devalue it? Because you had the experience, and that experience has made you who you are now. And so, what I'm basically saying by devaluing it is, no, I want you to be the person you were before the experience. That's who I know. I don't know who this person is. You couldn't have had that experience. Plus, it's not in the book, my philosophical book that I cherish so dearly.
Right. You know, a really, really interesting and super simple technique is if you got a piece of paper and rolled it up, like I'm going to do right now.
I'll take a little receipt that I have here and I'll roll it up. It'll work.
Now,
Okay.
let's say we're on the outside of the circle looking in, and I'm looking at you. As soon as I look at you, I disappear because all I can see is you.
Right. And I'm looking at you.
Right.
You're much smaller, but nonetheless, you're right.
Right. But and that's what happens. We forget that we're the viewer. We forget that we should be in the middle of every view. As soon as we start looking at something and analyzing something and judging something and considering something, we've instantly moved to the periphery. We can't have a clear view from the periphery. And yet if we reference ourselves and say, well, here I am, I can see this, but can I feel myself as well in this? Immediately that positions us back into the middle. Yes, I'm here. My view is coming from this. And we get that clearer view. But as viewers, you know, like in a cinema, you go and you watch the movie, you've disappeared for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
in the
you're
dark.
not viewing from your wisdom.
Yeah,
You're immersed
exactly.
in what the projection is. You move towards the projection. You've moved to the edge of the circle instead of staying in the middle and getting a clear view.
I remember in college, junior college, I was taking a photography class, and it was in black and white photography. And I was using my father's 35 millimeter Argus, old camera, and I still have it, and it still works. Still have the flash attachment. Finding bulbs is a whole nother story. But my friend and I, we were walking around near his house one day, and there was a car accident in the intersection of our neighborhood. And I walked over, had my camera, and I started taking pictures. I still have those photographs. And I tried the best I could to move around the accident from corner to corner if I could, as if I was allowed to, fine. If not, okay. To the point that I remember that the saying that if you had 10 people who saw this accident, you're going to get 10 different answers, which is one of the reasons why law enforcement, the police, they ask as many people who were there who saw it to tell them what they saw so that they can get a better idea of what happened. And I just thought this is a neat thing that I'm doing here in terms of taking all these pictures from these different angles. One of these days, I'm going to have to pull those out of the archives and put them up on and show people on YouTube on the videos. Okay, now this is that accident, probably going back to 1970, 79, 1970. My Lord, 41 years ago, 42 years ago. And of course, that street's no longer there because they put a freeway in. But and you were talking about the cinema. That projection is made up of individual images that are just moving at 24 frames or so per second. Well, the same thing is true of digital imagery, of film, of movies, of videos, if you will. Digital. It's just frames. Yeah, they're made up of pixels. That's also true. Zeros and ones. That's also true. But it's frames. I mean, when you do what's called scrolling through, when you have a that type of thing, you see the images jump, okay, from one position to the next. It's not fluid until you run it at speed. And I've often thought about that in terms of what we see with with our eyes.
Right.
We think it's fluid.
We
We
do.
think it's, yeah, and it's
We
not.
do. And we
It's
also think that it's solid,
and we think it's solid,
and it's
and it's not.
not.
I've
But
often
what's
just
really interesting about that, Richard, is that without the viewer, without the human attention, that story on the screen doesn't even exist. If there's no one there to view it, does it even exist?
I was thinking of now what you're saying in reference to that comment about a tree falling in the woods for some stupid reason. And I don't
Exactly.
mean this to be derogatory to anybody, because again, I was born and raised Catholic, as were you. If a tree is cut down in the woods, does the Pope fall over, and does anybody care? I don't know where the hell that came from, but it did. And maybe it was just a humorous twist. But you're right. If no one's there to see it, there's no story.
If there's no perspectives, there's no composite image.
There's nothing. Yeah.
Right.
Now, would that also imply that if there is no, and of course, this is a matter of perception, I think, too, if there's no light, the same is true? I mean, if it's dark, you can't see
Well, I
anything.
think that there's always light. I think it
Okay.
depends on how the light is filtered and directed.
Okay. But even if it was blocked, there's still light coming.
Well, there's still light, it's just not hitting that particular point of
Okay.
the dimensional fabric. So I think that, as light, can be bent and
Mm-hmm.
moved and manipulated. But
Yeah.
is there ever really an absence of light? I'm not so sure.
Hmm. I've often thought about that, especially in relation to the concept of sin. I've often thought of the concept of sin as I was working for the Christian station. I was going through my very pro Catholic phase. I went through my very pro Protestant phase. And then I shifted into my more metaphysical phase. And I used to think about the concept of sin. It's not the absence of light, it's that the light is being blocked by something.
Or that when
And
you're in an experience of sin, it's difficult to see the light.
exactly, because maybe your back is to it, so to speak, that type of thing. And I find that those concepts of lightness and darkness and so forth, I often think about many of the movies that we've seen in outer space, and you see all the twinkling lights, right? But
Mm.
every camera image I have ever seen, from say the space shuttle in orbit to Apollo spacecraft going to the moon, there's utter darkness other than the reflection of the sun's light off of the moon or the earth or the sun itself. You don't see any stars, but you do in the movies and television. And I'm going,
Mm.
wait a minute. Now, if I go outside tonight, I will, on a clear night, I will see the stars. And so I often wonder what that must have something to do with maybe some of the film settings, the aperture and those types of things, the f-stop as they call it, as I remember from photography. So maybe that's also part of that aspect of seeing the light, because we aren't focused. Our aperture isn't open wide enough to see the stars, to see the light, if you will, that kind of thing. Our
It's
awareness.
it's fascinating, isn't it? Because we have such a presumption that there is even a concept of light and a concept of dark.
Yeah.
And yet that's entirely based on a belief of duality, isn't it? I wonder if that wasn't even a question, if we'd even be able to distinguish between light and dark. They'd just be shades.
Well, and believe it or not, I even took a printing class in high school where we learned to typeset. And they told us that when you print, okay, this is before the computer, when you print a photograph, all right, it is made up of dots.
Mm.
And the way the dots are positioned determines the shading. I'm sure you're familiar with the painter Seurat, who painted
Yes.
Sunday Morning in the Park with George. And by the way, that is a wonderful play if no one's seen it, with Bernadette Peters and Andy Potemkin. I have the album. I have always loved that painting, but it was made up of dots. And if you looked close, all you saw was dots. But when you stepped way back, and this applies to the photograph too, that was printed on the paper, a black and white printed paper, newspaper, it was dots that were larger, smaller, closer together, farther apart, that created the shading. So I think there is some truth to that reality, that there is no duality. It's just shades.
It's how the fabric of reality arranges itself. And in this earth experience that we're having, it arranges itself in such a way that we have this sense of opposition with things, this sense of duality with things.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, isn't it?
And I'm hoping that our listeners do find it interesting, because it's obviously what we're talking about, and it's fascinating to me to go down I don't care. I love going down these rabbit holes. Okay. I'm going to have to reread Alice in Wonderland again to better understand it. But yet, by the same token, it is true, because we sometimes our fears prevent us from even looking at, let alone considering other possibilities.
Yes. And that's a question of control. I think our minds need to control so that we can feel safe within our reality. But if everything was just reduced to these dots on a page within our reality, is there any problem to be solved, really? Or should we just wonder at the arrangement of it all?
And even marvel at the arrangement. I mean, we'll choose a word. The word is tree. And you might think of a particular tree, but I'm going to look outside, and I'm going to see the marvel of the different trees. That they're all called the same thing, a tree, but each one of them is unique and different, just as each one of us. None of them are bad, and none of them are good.
We were just talking about this the other day, actually, that the earth reality and us as humans, we're designed for diversity of creation and diversity of experience, where no two creations are alike. And you have to ask the question, are we moving into an experience now collectively where we're becoming quite obsessed with uniformity, quite obsessed with consistency and repetition and reproduction of things in perfection, so that they can be replicated, whether it be with our produce, they've all got to look the same, or agriculture, the cows have all got to be the same size, or or children all have to graduate in the same kind of way, or it's so interesting, isn't it? Because it's kind of the antithesis to this variation of life and this diversity of creation that we're really designed for. At a cellular level, we're designed for diversity.
Well, I was taught, I've shared this many times, in school, in biology, that boys and girls are different, and that boys learn differently than girls. That girls' brains develop a little quicker, a little faster than boys. And again, that's just the way it is. It's not good or bad. And that boys have difficulty sitting still as young ones, in a desk, in a seat, and they've got to do the things that they're told to do. They have trouble doing that, and that's just the way they are. And then I get out of high school, and I'm hearing about ADD and ADHD and all of these other things, the attention deficit, and the alphabet just delineates with it. And they're prescribing specifically Ritalin. And I'm going, hold it, wait a minute, stop. You just told me back there when I was in the institution that we were all different, not only as unique individuals, but as boys and girls. And now you're trying to normalize them? Wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense to me. And that just seems to me what has happened.
I think that's just one example of this uniformity that we believe is a hallmark of success. And I think it's actually a diversion away from our uniqueness as a species.
Yeah. And then, of course, there are all of the different communities that we will become members of, whether it be religious, political, educational, economic, whatever category you want to choose, there's a group for it. And
Mhm.
I love it when somebody comes along who has decided to, let's say they decide to change their physical appearance, whether it's their hair or literally they'll have plastic surgery or they'll grow facial hair or and they want to be unique. And here's the real irony, the ironic rub. They do it and then everybody else starts following and they're no longer unique. And yet everybody that's following this person is saying, "Oh yeah, I'm doing this because I want to be unique." But you are doing it exactly. You're looking just like them. Now, yes, you are a unique individual, and it's not exactly. You're not a clone. Don't get me wrong. Find your
Well,
own look. I remember when we moved here, and I was wearing this kind of hat when we moved here to Santa Barbara, and then there was a story on the news that said that Brad Pitt was now wearing hats and he brought hat wearing back into style. And I'm going, I've been wearing a hat for years. How? And it's only because he gets the coverage and I don't. But
well,
isn't
I
that
think what
interesting? We
it
want to be
is.
unique and then we start copying one another.
Well, I think there's a distinction there because I think the desire to be unique is part of our natural design because we're exerting our natural design. We're all completely unique in our
Mm-hmm.
cellular design, and
Yeah.
our souls are all completely unique. So I think that that's natural to want to be unique. I think what you're describing as the follow-on effect from that is this mind obsession with belonging to the image that you see appear on the screen.
Okay.
And so, again, you're being asserting your uniqueness, you're sitting back in the center of your sphere. And as soon as you try to belong to one of the projected images you see, you move away from it and you become part of the consistency and the reproduction and repetition of what everybody else is doing.
Back in the early 90s, I found a philosophy, the Baha'i faith.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I would go to their firesides, as they called them, these gatherings where people could come and learn about the teachings of Baha'u'llah. I was so intrigued, and they were so welcoming, so loving, so appreciative of my questions and curiosity that I began the process of, if you will, converting. I even went so far as to take a letter of the request to have my name removed from the rolls of the Catholic Church. I took it to the diocesan office, and the woman said to me, from my perspective, in utter surprise, "No problem, Richard. We'll put it in your file." To which I said, "Wait a minute, you and the FBI?" Um, but I thought that was so funny. But after a year and a half of really enjoying being around these people and learning of the faith and the teachings, and I still have all the books that I got. I realized that I had joined under what I called false pretenses. I joined because I wanted to belong, not because I believed. And so I asked, I says, I can't. I'm sorry, but maybe I'll come back one day. Can you remove my name? And they said, "No problem. You're always welcome to come back." Uh, you know, and I think that when we are able to do that and say, "Oh, I think I may have joined this group or this tribe or this club for the wrong reasons. I'm not really into electric trains, but I like being around you guys." Then I think we start to develop our own uniqueness.
I totally hear what you're saying. And from a slightly different position within that, I found that when I was starting to really develop quite a strong community around some of the channelings that we were bringing through. And what I started to discover was it was it was becoming quite encapsulated as a community. The community itself was starting to make rules for themselves and for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a little experiment one day. We did one of our regular gatherings, and I invited in some people who had never been to any of these before just to come in and have a look. I invited them personally myself. And what I noticed was that there was a very distinct ripple that went through the community that we're not sure these people should be here or belong here. And there was a real sense of separation within it. And from that day, I disbanded everything because I realized that what was happening was that there was a sense of belonging that was happening there. And to me, that's not giving people that freedom to keep exploring, because
Yeah.
I don't believe that wisdom is really to give people a sense of safety so they can set up shop and create rules and
Yeah.
who gets in and who doesn't get in. I think that's very dangerous waters. So I think the openness always is super important. People can come and people can go, and there's no rules here. You're all unique.
Well, I'll tell you that I used to challenge them at the firesides in regards to other writings, other than those of Baha'u'llah and the other founders of the faith. And they said that, oh, no, you're more than welcome to read the writings of others, but it will just bring you right back to the writings of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith. And I thought, okay, I can't disagree because that may happen. But they were still, again, it was still that openness.
Beautiful.
You even said too earlier, you also said earlier that that's one of the things that we need to be on guard for when we start to um, hold on to the wisdom, the information, the data, if you will, instead of observing it and just letting it be what it will be, because it is constantly changing.
It's constantly changing, but also I think there's something deeper in it too, because we have learned, over so many eons here in this reality, to value that which sits beyond us more than ourselves. And people become very attached to the information. The information, the wisdom, the knowledge becomes what is treasured, becomes what is coveted. It becomes a valuable resource. And I think we see that in our world now, how information is the most valuable commodity, perhaps, that there is. And yet that is completely diverging our attention and our sense of empowerment to something that sits outside of ourselves, rather than saying, there's a bit of knowledge or information. What does that invoke within me that I know? And then that's you. That's yours. No one can ever take that away from you. So to treasure the information, I think we need to be cautious about that. And I think that's one of the reasons the master said you have to be willing to burn this. Because the real treasure here is in what awakens within you.
Mm-hmm.
The information is never going to give that to you. It's never going to give you that view, because you are the viewer. But it can invoke something, it can provoke something within you or ignite something. But so often we become attached to the information.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
information, it's what is it? It's words on a page. It's, it's how you respond to it. You're the living waters.
Yeah.
You're the living entity.
Where does community fall into this? Fall in all of this? In that we in the United States, we have a document that tells us that we have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of individuality.
Important things.
And it also talks about we have inalienable rights of life and liberty and pursuit of happiness. But also, it talks about um, promoting the general welfare. The general welfare implies group, more than one, and securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves, plural, ourselves, and our, plural, posterity, future residents of this country, community, nation. How do we juxtapose this concept we've been talking about for almost an hour with that concept where we want to get something done, but 37% of us don't want to do it, and 16% of us do want to do it, and all the others don't care? And so we're never going to get anything done, and we're never going to move forward. And I mean, that's kind of the drama that has unfolded within community, is all of that just minutia? It's nothing. And that if we stand in the center of that sphere, as you've described over and over again, that we're more likely to find and draw to us those who are in their center of their sphere, who are interested in maybe co-creating together.
Well, you've just completely encapsulated the whole theme of the book, The Agreement, because that's what the agreement is. Once you move into the center point of your being, everything, your experience is all about resonance. So rather than having to strive or rub up against and negotiate and compromise and come to some form of, we call it agreement, but it's really based on sacrifice. Someone has to sacrifice something for the greater good. That's been our belief, rather than the agreement that comes from, I'm now drawing people into my experience that are in complete resonance with the same vision that I have, or a similar vision that I have, and we create from there. So I think, fundamentally creating a structure of governance that has one way and one set of rules to cover everybody in itself is problematic. I have hope and vision for the future of humanity, whereby there are subsets of guidelines that you can gravitate towards based on what feels appropriate for you, and that there are communities based upon that, and everyone within that community is in agreement, and then there's no need for territorial issues or
Right. Well, when I think of spirit, when I think of the essence that that lives inside this body of mine, as does in yours, and I think of the way in which spirit lives outside of the body, let's say the life between lives, okay, in that period. When I think of life and liberty, when I think of freedom and independence, the first thing that comes to my mind is not that they're wrong or right, but that when they are talked about in the context of spirit, they're irrelevant. They're just irrelevant. What are your thoughts, or what are you getting from spirit?
Because we're in this earth reality where everything is dualistic. So it's either right or wrong, black or white, left or right, up or down.
Yeah.
But once you go beyond that and you go beyond belief, there's no division. It is what it is. And so you begin to see, like the sphere, you begin to see all of the images at once. So you see the experience in its totality. As soon as you see something in its totality, there is no judgment or assessment of it, because it's whole. Like if you saw the image of the yin and yang, there it is, it's whole. There's what is there to say about it? When we look at the earth from space, supposedly, let's take a look at that image. What is there to say about it? It's complete, it's whole.
Yeah.
Does it appear to be a problem? Nothing looks like a problem when you see it in its totality. And I think part of our obsession in humanity has become everything as a problem to be solved. We're problems to be solved. The earth is a problem to be solved. Our daily lives are problems to be solved. But when you have that total spherical view, it's just magnificent. Where's the problem?
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens, in what you're describing between lives. You're in that space. It's like, where's the problem here? What if we made choices from that place? I'm sure we would all choose to do things very differently.
I think we would. It would be beautiful if we could start raising our children with that concept. It would be a wonderful thing. Rebecca Dawson, I want to thank you so much for giving us literally so much time. It has been over an hour, and I thank you so much. It's morning where you are. It's into nighttime where I am as we are conversing. And it is wonderful to be able to communicate and connect across the great divide of time, let alone space, from my future to your past.
Really, both in the center of the sphere. That's the truth.
And we're both in the center of the sphere, and I really appreciate it. And I encourage people to go to your website, which is RebeccaDawson.com. Is that correct?
.net.
.net. You
Yeah,
still have a .net, and that's
I
okay.
do.
It's a good thing. It still works. I mean, I remember when .net was around before .com, and that goes back to the 90s. That was a long time ago. But anyway, I thank you so much. I do want to ask you the three questions that I ask all of my guests. I've asked you before. But before I do that, I want to let our listeners know that you're listening to Tell Me Your Story. It is a program designed with you in mind, with new paradigms for a new world. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices. Oh my gosh, my brain is just throbbing right now with excitement over what we've discussed in this hour. I hope yours is as well. And you ponder what we've talked about. I also hope that you will listen to the programs on Sunday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. and Monday mornings at 1 a.m. streamed live at richarddugan.com with the podcast, this program as well, on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, and many other locations as well. Also on YouTube. And you can watch these interviews. And we will be putting up her website, RebeccaDawson.net, as well as ours. And we also will encourage you to go to her website, RebeccaDawson.net, as well as participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision. Go into that sphere. Now there's a great image to aspire to, is to spend time in that quiet space in the center of your own sphere, of your own making. You want to line it with carpeting? Velour, I don't care. You can make it whatever you want, and it's a safe place to be, to also listen to that still small voice that is always there to encourage you, to guide you, to let you know that you are perfect just the way you are, because you just are. Period. End of story. And if you'd like to support the work we're doing, please, PayPal and Patreon accounts are there for your security as well as ours. So as we bring this wonderful edition of Tell Me Your Story to a close, I have three final questions that I love asking my guests, especially because of some of the responses that I get before they even answer the question. And the first, of course, is, who is Rebecca Dawson?
Oh, Rebecca Dawson today is an aspect of source energy that is presenting in this interview.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve, if I'm not violating a rule here, if that you want to achieve with the work that you are doing now?
Oh, I think I've actually dropped through all of that. So it's really just the daily joy in watching it unfold.
And to wit, that's probably the same answer for my final question of, what is your life's purpose? I remember when you referenced purpose, and that it wasn't something that we're going after anymore. But well, nonetheless, I put that question forth to you.
After surviving a major heart attack in the last 6 months, and brain aneurysm, I know, interesting. I feel that it's actually just to choose to be here each day.
Well, we thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Actually, and we, as a matter of fact, to be of the most accurate, it is grateful to have you here yesterday and today and tomorrow.
In the present.
In the present. You got it. It's all one. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much, Richard. Beautiful.
And I thank you for listening and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I will be here in our next broadcast. This has been a special broadcast. Don't miss our regulars. Don't miss our podcasts. Don't miss our video casts. And until our next one, love to lull.